When you think of Belgian baking, you probably picture waffles or speculoos. But in the city of Verviers, there's another tradition, one that rarely leaves its hometown. It's called the Vaution, and it's as much a piece of local identity as it is dessert, with roots going back generations. Think of it like a cinnamon roll transformed into a cake. Discs of dough stacked with butter, sugar, and cinnamon until the whole thing bakes into a gooey, comforting tart. Today we're diving into the history of this little-known Belgian classic and baking one ourselves. Let's get started. We're going to start by making a sweet brioche dough. Now, the recipe I'm using today is, at least according to the internet, by Jean-Philippe Darcy, the most renowned pastry chef in Verviers. I don't have any claims to back that up, but that's what this one internet post said, so I'm going to try using this recipe and we're going to see how it turns out. And there are many different ways to make this. Every family has their own variation, but we'll talk more about that later. So I'm going to start by adding some lukewarm milk to my stand mixer with some instant yeast and some sugar. And we're just gonna mix that and let it sit for a couple of minutes while the yeast dissolves and blooms. Nobody knows exactly when the Vaution was first created, but it's very much been a part of Verviers for at least a few centuries. Its name is even a puzzle. There's some debate about what its name derives from. It's thought maybe it comes from the Wallonian word wandion. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but this word means bedbug. And the thought is maybe it means that because it's flat like a bug. Then there's another theory that it comes from the Wallonian word vaut, which means pancake. So does this name mean bedbug, or does this name derive from the word for pancake? My guess is probably pancake, because you're rolling out the dough into discs like a pancake and stacking them up. So that's my guess for what this name comes from and what it means. Now that the yeast has had a few minutes to bloom, we're going to add the rest of the ingredients, which are flour, and I'm using all-purpose here just because you probably don't want too much of a chewy texture when you're making a dessert like this, and salt, and an egg. We'll mix that all together until it's pretty well combined, and then start adding in the softened unsalted butter a little bit at a time as it needs.
Let the mixture come together until it forms a dough, and then once a dough has roughly formed, you're going to add in that softened butter a tablespoon at a time, and you're going to wait for each of those tablespoons to be fully incorporated until you add in the next one. Once all of that butter is added, you're going to let this knead for about 10 minutes on medium speed until it is smooth and glossy and stretchy.
Now that the dough is finished kneading, I'm going to divide this dough into 5 pieces, but I'm not going to divide it into 5 equal pieces, because you want the top and the bottom piece that you're going to eventually roll out to be bigger than the center pieces. So you need 2 sections of dough that are 200 grams, and then the other 3 sections of dough will be 150 grams each.
In the end, I had a little bit of extra leftover dough. I think it was about 75 grams, so I just divided that in half and divided it amongst the 2 larger balls of dough. So if you have any leftover, just divide it equally amongst them. Then you're going to form them into balls and cover them with plastic wrap and let them rise for about 40 minutes to an hour until they're doubled in size.
I took my dough out of the oven. It has pretty much doubled in size. Yep. And so now we're going to roll it out and fill it with the filling. Now this filling is quite decadent. I've never had to get a bowl out this big for the butter that it calls for. It calls for equal parts butter and sugar. It said about 500 grams of sugar and about 500 grams of butter. So we're gonna see how that goes because that is an excessive amount of butter. So turns out, as I thought, way too much butter. It completely leaked out of the tart as it was baking. So I tested it a second time and I think I perfected it. It's actually going to be half of the amount recommended. So instead of 500 grams, 250 grams of sugar, 250 grams of butter, and 1 tablespoon of cinnamon or to taste. And then each layer, if you want to get really specific, you're going to divide that number by 4 and put about, I think, 64 grams of sugar and butter in each layer. But you don't have to do that. You can just eyeball it. But the rest of the tutorial, it's accurate minus the numbers for that original filling. So just proceed with the video, but cut that filling in half. So we're going to first start with taking one of the 200 gram pieces of dough and rolling it into a disc. And then this will be the bottom layer. So now the idea is that you layer the sugar and the butter onto the pastry or the dough discs. Then you're going to take the cubed butter and distribute that over the sugar. But you are supposed to keep a little bit of a border where the sugar and the butter aren't touching, because when you put the top disc over it, you're going to seal those two together with an egg wash. So now I'm going to roll out the smaller discs of dough, and we're going to complete the same process, and then the top bigger piece of dough will be rolled out to seal the whole thing. I love lesser known bakes like this, especially more rustic homemade style ones, because what a special tradition that something like this isn't really known even in other parts of Belgium. Is there a regional dessert or a regional food that you've ever come across that you found to be particularly unique and it's really lesser known and most people don't know about it? Share with me below in the comments if you've ever come across something like that and what it is.
You're going to repeat the same process over and over until you've used your 3 small discs of dough, and you're just going to layer that cinnamon sugar, put the butter on top of that, layer the next piece of dough on top of it, and you want to keep those smaller pieces of dough inside that larger circle so that it's not creating layers on the edge. You want all of those small balls of dough to be within that 1-inch perimeter that you've created. And like I said, this was way too much sugar and way too much butter, so just follow the measurements that I'm giving you in the printable recipe and on the screen, instead of the large amount that you see me adding in the video. Do you like really unique bakes like this? Do you like learning about culinary exploration, learning about different cultures, different cuisines? Then this is the channel for you. So I invite you to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this one, where I delve into a European baked good and the history and traditions surrounding it. So if that's up your alley, I hope you'll stick around. And you're going to take that final big piece of dough, you're going to roll it out into a large disc that covers the whole thing. You're going to press those edges together, and then you're going to bend them up and curl them around and seal them until the whole thing is a tight sealed mass. You don't want that butter spilling out as it cooks. Then you're going to cover that with plastic wrap and let it rise for about 30 minutes.
Lesser known bakes like this are so special. It didn't become an international brand like speculoos or Belgian waffles. It was just quietly passed down through the generations from family to family and baker to baker, tied to local traditions and to local fairs and festivals. And that's what I find so special about these types of recipes, is that they're just not known outside of their little town or village. If you go to Brussels or Liège, they don't know what a Vaution de Verviers is. And because of this, there's all these different variations on how to make it. Every family has their own recipe. I watched a few videos where on the last layer, before you put the top layer of dough on, they would put a dollop of creme fraiche. So everybody has their own version. The one I picked was from a local pastry chef, but you know, grandma has her version, the local baker has his version, but they all taste very similar to one another, and they're all considered Vaution de Verviers. So like I said before, let me know in the comments below, are there any regional foods that you've come across in different places that you've visited, or cookbooks that you've looked at and been like, wow, I can't believe that is a food from that place and tied to this tradition. It's all very interesting. So if you've ever come across something like that, let me know in the comments below.
After it's rested for 30 minutes, brush it with the egg wash and seal those edges with the egg wash to keep them from opening as they bake. And then you're going to sprinkle the egg wash with powdered sugar and put some vents in the top of the dough so that it doesn't burst and explode when it's baking. Then you're going to bake this at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 180 degrees Celsius for about 30 minutes until golden brown and spread out and caramelized, and you're going to let that cool till just about room temperature before you slice into it. You want it to cool down, but you also want to eat it slightly warm.
That first version that I made with the 500 grams of butter, it was kind of gooey and greasy, and I'm glad I tried it this second way with half the amount. So let's see how this one turned out. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. It tastes exactly like a cinnamon roll. It's gooey, comforting, but it's not too greasy. There isn't too much butter this time. Highly recommend making this, especially if you don't like rolling up the individual rolls. If that's too much work for you, this is almost kind of easier. One thing that's really unique about Belgian baking is that they highlight sugar as the main ingredient or the main star of the show in a lot of their desserts. And a lot of it has to do with their history of the sugar trade. And so I'm actually sending a newsletter out next week where I talk about the rise and fall of the sugar trade in Antwerp and how a lot of the desserts feature sugar as the main star of the show. So and you'll get to have a new recipe that I don't feature on the channel. So subscribe to my newsletter below if you want to learn more about the history of Belgian baking and learn more about the different bakes around Belgian countryside as well as the Netherlands. They have a very similar baking tradition. So the link is in the description box if you're interested. If you want another perfect fall pastry, I would recommend watching my Estonian kringle recipe next. That's a chocolate cinnamon wreath, and it has similar vibes to this one. So if you like this, I think you'll like that. So watch that after this, and I'll see you next time.